Hello and welcome everyone to the Solo Multimedia Podcast, where I give you my unfiltered takes straight off the cuff. And today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I looked around all the releases and I couldn't really see a whole heck of a lot that I was super interested in. But tomorrow the new Vane FM album comes out, which is an album that I've been reasonably excited for a while, for a bunch of different reasons that we'll get into. But for those who don't know, Vane are essentially a metalcore band that came onto the scene a while back with a couple EPs that I haven't listened to. But I think the first thing that dropped that really carried them across from the US to the UK was they released a EP with a band called Gift from God. And that was like a split. It was just like a 4-track EP, 5 minutes in runtime, very short little thing. But the Vane songs on this EP pretty much blew me out the water. There was so many incredibly harsh, gnarly, just very visceral ideas across the record, from absolutely savage beatdowns to really, really discordant riffing and very intense blast beats as well. Across 5 minutes, they packed in so many ideas that it was kind of I don't know, it was a very explosive EP for them, for sure, for people that weren't in the US. I'm sure there were people in the local scene that knew them, but as far as I'm aware, it was basically it. And after this EP released, I became a huge fan of the band. I listened to it, I was like, this is incredible. I especially loved a lot of what they did with guitar effect pedals. They had loads of weird squelching sounds and just very angular, weird, harsh sounds across the entire record coming straight out of the guitars. Not to mention that the, vocals are also savage as fuck, and the drumming on that EP is truly brilliant as well. It's incredibly frenetic. Everything feels really fluid. So the way the drummer goes from blast beat into a fill, into a 2-step rhythm, into a beat down, all of it is just so fluid and smooth, and he does a fantastic job in this band, just in general, of having a ton of forward momentum with everything he does, and I think it's really, really impressive. It's just really impressive to be able to pull drum parts like that together, especially when you can fucking nail them live, because I've seen him a couple times. Actually, I think I've only seen them once, but either way, he's very, very good, is the point I'm trying to get across. But anyway, after that EP came out, I was very excited to see what they put out next. The album was called Errorzone, which is what they were going to follow it up with. They released the first single to it. I can't remember when, but it was a solid couple months at the very least, maybe up to 6 months before the album. And it was called Virus Vibrance. And when I heard this, I gotta say, I definitely had my reservations, because they brought in a ton of kind of nu metal influences and sort of electronic influences as well. And it was a bit of a shift, but not a huge one, just maybe one in such a way that I wasn't ultra excited about, especially because at the time, Code Orange had just released, I think, Forever, and moved into some of that nu metal or groove metal kind of territory that I was less keen on at the time, which was just a bit unfortunate, I guess, especially for the kind of metalcore I wanted at the time, because I was super into Dillinger and the mathcore shit. So that was unfortunate for Code Orange, and after hearing the single, I was a bit a bit cautious on the album release. But eventually the album came out, and I feel like the main reason I'm doing this is almost to, I guess the best way to put it is to repent for my sins somewhat. Basically, when the album came out, I was maybe slightly harsher on it than I should have been, because it definitely... There were issues with it. It didn't have as many ideas as the EP that had come before it, and it definitely pulled from a lot of places that in heavy music I was less interested in, especially at the time. But as it's been so long since then, I've just been listening to the record a shocking amount, considering how lukewarm I was on it at the time. I think a lot of what helped is after seeing them live and just seeing how much ferocity they play with, I think that really helped add a lot of context to the album, because if you listen to this record, you're just going to get a bunch of incredibly heavy metalcore breakdowns. There's a couple electronic bits. There's a couple of those guitar effect pedal types bits from the EP that you would hope for, at least that I was hoping for. And there are some more mathcore focused songs, I think, I forget the name of the song. I think Quitting Infinity is the one on the end, and then there's Broken Glass Complexion. I think that's one of the songs on it that's more mathy. But those songs were fewer and further between the kind of more just straight beat down, very metallic hardcore focused songs, like Old Data and A New Machine. Virus Vibrance, of course, and then you had like also weirdly melodic sections on like Doom Tech and End Eternal, which pulled straight from, to me at the time, pulled straight from something like Killswitch Engage, which is a band I've never been particularly huge on. But now with more context, I can see it's more from that kind of like Seven Angels, Seven Plagues, and Poison the Well type of, that type of metalcore, essentially. But the one thing I really didn't give this album enough credit for at the time was just that forward momentum I was talking about across the EP is here in spades. Like, the whole thing is only like maybe, 30 minutes long, and in that time it just does not let up. You just have so many mosh-friendly riffs, and they're all incredibly good, incredibly tightly performed, to an almost disgusting degree, to the point that if you see them, it will just be like a 40-minute set and an absolute blur of violence and like mic grabs and sway, and it'll be a great time if you're into that kind of thing, for sure. So yeah, I have to say that. Well, I don't know if I would say this album's like a classic or anything. I definitely underrated it when it came out, and with enough time having passed, I can definitely say that this album has stood the test of time better than I could have ever conceived at the time. It's not flawless. There's definitely still a couple moments maybe on like, I think End Eternal is like the biggest kind of like, what's the word? The biggest outlier, I guess, in this. It has probably one of the most melodic. It has a section at the end that basically sounds like it could have been ripped straight off from Killswitch Engage, which is definitely the part of the record I'm the least interested in. But when it's just doing that like forward momentum, like really, really incredible tight drumming that carries riff to riff incredibly smoothly, when you get like a couple little guitar licks with effects to just give them a sharper edge or something to, really help a like beat down punch that much harder, or when you're getting those really like frenetic passages on something like Quitting Infinity and all of that stuff, like all of it is so tightly performed and just so savage that it's hard to deny, especially if you're into incredibly visceral guitar music. The whole thing just feels like you're being sucked into this incredibly like angsty world for like 30 minutes, and it really is quite an impressive feeling. So with all that being said, I am very excited to hear the record tomorrow and very excited to see where they go. But for anyone who hasn't listened to this album, I'd highly recommend it. You're going to get a ton of like ultra crunchy guitar tones playing like these super like gross mid-paced riffs. You're going to get the occasional bit of like shrill Dillinger, like just franticness. You're going to get, occasionally melodies here and there that really, really add some flavor to the mix, even if I'm not the biggest fan of all of them. You even get a couple passages that are a bit more atmospheric, which, add something for sure as well. Maybe pulling from someone like Deftones. Like I said, you do also get those like new metal-y kind of riffs, like Virus Vibrance. Definitely, the main riff definitely sounds like something that almost like a really hardcore version of Limp Bizkit could have pulled off, I guess. Which may sound like a very strange description, but believe me, it's surprisingly good. I mean, it's hard to not compare them to new metal, at least a little bit, because they have like a DJ on stage and everything, which is just very bizarre. But it works really well. He plays all the samples, does a bunch of, effects and stuff like that. It works really well. It's a good look and good sound for them, for sure. And yeah, I'm just incredibly excited to see what the record holds tomorrow. I think they've released like 3 singles so far. I think The Killing Womb is the best one. Song absolutely fucking annihilates everything around it. It's just such a crushing song. The other 2 I think I've listened to a lot less because I don't like spoiling myself too much for albums. But either way, like I said, if you haven't listened to Errorzone and this sounds like something you'd be into, you can't really go wrong. If you get into this record, it's just very mosh friendly. If you're into all of that, if you enjoy jumping off, stages at your local hardcore venues and stuff, then yeah, I mean, I'm probably preaching to the choir. Like, everybody who wants to listen to this album or is into those scenes probably has already heard it, realistically. But regardless, like I said, this is just kind of a repentance for my sins. I guess as far as highlights go, like I said, I'm into the more frenetic moments. But over the years, I've really gained an appreciation as well for just some of the straight savage moments. Like, old Data in a New Machine is basically about as straight up like metallic hardcore as you can get for a band like this. There is still maybe a couple moments of experimentation on there, but not a ton. But that song just, oh my god, every single riff hits so hard because of the way they contextualize it with everything else around it. So like you'll have like a much faster riff, for example, that kind of opens up the song with like very punchy drumming that's just very on the beat, like, and it will have snare hits that are right in line with the slightly sharper chords of the riff, and then you'll have this like huge drum fill that slows down midway while the guitars just wail over the top, and it all leads into, you know, like a really hard, really just a hard beat down, that is just, you know, just feels like it has so much forward momentum. And I don't know, it's almost impossible not to hear parts like that across the entire album and not get hyped as fuck on what's about to happen, just because of how well they carry the momentum forward. And that also works between songs as well. Like you've got a few kind of like, I guess you could say sibling songs on this record. There's one that sounds a lot like Sepultura, actually, that's functionally an interlude that goes straight into the next song. I forget the name of the interlude bit, but I think the actual song that it intros is called Demise Automation or something like that. That song's just savage as fuck. You know, it's got some cool melodies on it, but it's mostly a short, really hard-ass track. So yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything else to say about this. It's just a very, very good album. I'd highly recommend everybody listen to it, even if you're only slightly interested in guitar music. It's not the easiest thing to listen to if you're not super used to screamed vocals and that kind of thing. It is quite harsh. It is, like I said, quite frenetic. So you're gonna, you know, you'll probably get whipped up into a fury listening to it, but you might not remember huge chunks of it on a first listen, especially if you're not used to this style of music. But you know, with repeated listens, you'll definitely start remembering some of the riffs. It's very easy for me to like visualize a ton of the riffs on the album just because they're surprisingly catchy, and just again, like I said, because everything is so well encapsulated with everything else around it, and everything flows into each other so well from track to track and from riff to riff that, you know, it's very easy to remember entire sequences of riffs just because of the way everything's contextualized. But yeah, that's pretty much everything I have to say. I'm very excited to hear the album tomorrow. Cheers for listening, and I hope to see you all around in the future. All right, peace out, everybody.